Welcome back to the top 20 most disappointing games of 2016 countdown. If you haven't seen the other parts yet, be sure to check the video description where I'll put a link because you want to watch these in order so that it makes sense. And you also don't want to miss out on some of the crappiest games of the past year. Without further ado, let's continue with our countdown. Number 10, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutants in Manhattan. Boy, have the Ninja Turtles been through the ringer when it comes to the insane amount of shitty cash-in video games that they've been used in to rob gamers of their hard-earned dollar. At least Mutants in Manhattan tried to do some fan service, including a lot of villains and a lot of interesting plot lines and things, high-quality voice acting, some pretty decent graphics that are gonna please longtime fans of the Ninja Turtles series. It's just too bad that all of that was combined with some of the most boring, repetitive, button-mashing, grindy gameplay you've ever seen. The fact that once there were more than a few enemies on the screen, it was absolutely impossible to keep track of combat because enemies would lunge from behind the camera or off screen to basically screw up your combos, and the free-flowing combat of the game ended up failing because of it. And also the fact that this game only took about 4 to 5 hours to beat, but was being sold for $50 US at launch, pretending like it was a full retail release when in reality it was more of a small digestible digital content release. It was completely unacceptable. What a letdown for those of us who've been longtime fans of the franchise and were hoping that Platinum Games could finally turn around the insanely long streak of video game stinkers that the Ninja Turtles have been involved in. Mutants in Manhattan sadly did not do that. Number 9, Umbrella Corps. Originally titled Resident Evil Umbrella Corps, but removing the Resident Evil from the title to avoid fan backlash, this game is just another case of Capcom creating a shameless spin-off for a cash-in on a franchise that has nothing to do with the core gameplay of the game. I'll be honest here, for the first couple of hours that I played Umbrella Corps, even though I knew the game was terrible, having really bad animations, a varying frame rate that made it unplayable in certain situations, and just kind of silly game mechanics, it was kind of a guilty pleasure because playing on maps such as the Arctic base from Resident Evil 0 or the African village from Resident Evil 5 actually felt kind of cool to have this kind of competitive third-person shooter with monsters and zombie elements kind of put into the gameplay that you never seen in any kind of a game like this before. But immediately after one day, the entire game broke down when people found the insanely abusable things in the game, including an insta-kill melee attack that lunged through rooms, enemies, and teleported people through any kind of danger to instantly stab the opponent in the head with little to no effort. The entire game diluted from an interesting third-person shooter with monsters to a game where you run around with a little axe hook and you stab everyone in the head because the game's a broken piece of crap. What a shame. What a piece of shit. It really was a shameless cash-in. Shame on Capcom for the upteenth freaking time. Number 8, Mirror's Edge Catalyst. It was a long 8-year wait for Catalyst, the semi-sequel slash reboot to the Mirror's Edge franchise, to finally be released in 2016. Sadly, it wasn't worth the wait. This game took the franchise into an open world environment, taking the free-flowing parkour gameplay and combat from the original game and adding in 30 plus hours of boring, repetitive, and utterly meaningless side content, including fetch quests, time trials, and all those kind of boring things that other open world games have done in the past. There was absolutely no originality put into this game. In fact, the story itself could be rushed through in 5 to 8 hours and not needing any of the experience points or abilities unlocked doing the side content, making it absolutely and completely worthless. In addition, because the game went open world, it meant that it had all the bugs, glitches, physics problems, and everything that happens and comes with an open world game, making the game feel incredibly unpolished, unlike the original game. Of course, there's also the ridiculously wonky combat, where every time you kick someone, they go completely paralyzed like a wet noodle, leading to hilarious things that obviously were not intended by the game developers. And then to add insult to injury, once you finally beat the game literally tells you at the end Oops, nothing that you did during this game mattered because nothing changed, but hopefully you'll buy the sequel when we'll get to see if anything that happens in the future. It's a complete and utter ripoff, a game that should not have existed unless they were actually going to put some effort into it. Unfortunately, it looked like they took the easy way out, instead cramming in tons of repetitive and meaningless side content to claim that they had a game longer than 5 to 8 hours. It was a blatant lie, it was an underwhelming fail, and Mirror's Edge Catalyst ultimately is just going to be a forgotten footnote in gaming history. Number 7, The Last Guardian. Yup, another game on this countdown that we can chalk up to being stuck in development hell. The Last Guardian was a Team Ico exclusive game that was supposed to be a system seller for the PS3, but ended up not being released until the fall of 2016 due to massive amounts of production delays and development horror stories. When it finally was released, it was incredibly underwhelming. The platforming and puzzles were basic and simple. The game had absolutely no replayability because there's no collectibles or secrets or hidden anything in the game. The game can be beaten in an underwhelming 10 hours for a full-priced retail release. The graphics performed horribly on the PlayStation 4 with a frame rate that chugged below 30 frames per second many different times of the game. And ultimately, the game just feels dated. If this game had come out during the PS3 era, before we had played games with better graphics, better puzzles, and better platforming, then maybe we all would have been blown away. But the sad fact is, the only real thing that this game has going for it is the emotional connection between the protagonist and the creature. And even then, as your trust level grows throughout the game, sometimes the creature won't even listen to you, leading to a massive amount of frustration as you point repeatedly in the direction you want to go, and the damn thing just stands there laughing at you, sometimes even turning around and going backwards away from the way you want to progress. It really is annoying and frustrating, and some people have defended this game saying, but there's emotional connection and that's a really awesome experience, or, oh, the creature doesn't listen to you all the time because an animal in real life doesn't listen to you all the time, right? Listen. The bottom line is, there have been other video games with emotional connections between the development cycle of this game that have done it better, and those games have surpassed what this game was trying to do. And sorry, a game with unresponsive controls, whether they're intentional or not, is still a game with unresponsive controls that are incredibly annoying. So The Last Guardian would have probably been an amazing, breathtaking game if it actually had been released during the PS3 era, but been there, done that. We've seen games with better graphics, better controls, better platforming, better puzzles, and pretty much everything in this game done better already. Too little, too damn late. Number 6, Ghostbusters. If you thought that the modern era reboot of the classic comedy franchise that came out in this summer of 2016 in movie form was the worst possible thing, you didn't play the video game tie-in. Not only was this game sold for a full $60, the game didn't have any of the characters of the reboot movie in it, nor did it have any of the voice talents of the actresses. The game itself was an incredibly uninspired 4-player cooperative shoot-'em-up by which you fight waves and waves of generic ghosts and enemies. After you've played the first couple of stages, you've pretty much seen everything that the game has to offer. There's little to no replayability at all, and it's just an insanely boring, repetitive, uninspired grind, the likes of which you've played many times before. How this game could be sold for a full $60 is completely unacceptable. It's obviously a shameless cash-in and ripoff based off of the Ghostbusters franchise, trying to prey upon people who actually liked the movie and were looking for a little bit more when the lore of this game, which doesn't exist. So the question is, how was this possible? And the answer came a couple months later when the news actually hit the internet that the company that had made this Ghostbusters game went out of business. That's right, they already were in so much crippling debt during the development of this game, they realized that they could make a little bit of a cheap buck by using the Ghostbusters franchise and releasing a piece of crap to maybe liquidate some of that debt. So really, this game wasn't a game, it was an effort by a failing game company to try to pay off some of their already overwhelming debt from previously failed gaming ventures. What a joke. We all got fooled, at least the few of us who actually bought the game. I think most of us, however, have learned that these game tie-ins are just a huge ripoff, and we're not going to be fooled by them in the future. Number 5, Star Fox Zero. Nintendo. I could talk all day about the woes of this company and how they've lost touch with the major consumer and gamer, and Star Fox Zero is pretty much the quintessential example of this. A franchise that always kind of lauded itself on having great flying controls decided to instead adapt itself completely to a mandatory control scheme using the Wii U gamepad and gyroscopic motion. The vast majority of people who played Star Fox Zero hated the controls of the game because they were forced to put down the controller they know and love and pick up this ginormous Wii U gamepad, which led to imprecise controls and a lot of frustration. But it wasn't just the controls that made this game kind of underwhelming. It was really short for a full retail game in the modern era, being basically clocking in at about the same length as the original Star Fox and Star Fox 64 from the 1990s, which is unacceptable. Yes, there were optional stages, but you had to replay the same stages over and over to unlock them, and even once you played all of them, the game only equated to about 8 hours of gameplay, which is completely and utterly unacceptable. The graphics were underwhelming, and the new gameplay elements of the game were barely even used, with the tank and the few other vehicles only being used in 1 or 2 stages total of the entire game. It really felt like it was rushed, like it was unfinished, and it just wasn't a complete retail release for 2016. Sad, because I'm a huge fan of the Star Fox franchise, and to see it crash and burn like it did was really disappointing. Well, that's it for this part. Hope you liked the video, and if you did, please consider giving it a like here on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe to KO Gaming so you don't miss the end of this countdown, as well as other ones coming up in the future. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time for the most disappointing games of 2016. Peace out.